Building luxury brands through live experiences. Now this is thoughtful. Hello, I'm Trevor Lai in Shanghai. Affluent Chinese are avid consumers of luxury products, but they don't always know the heritage of the brands, and they often need guidance about how to consume luxury products. This week on Thoughtful China, we'll find out how to make experiential luxury marketing succeed. Plus, our own PT Black will share a few tips that every luxury retailer should hear. But first, we recently spoke with Lawrence Law, a brand director at Moet Hennessy Diageo at the new Johnnie Walker House in Shanghai. Lawrence, thanks for having us to the Johnnie Walker House.
Welcome.
Let's take a quick look around. Can you tell us a bit about each floor?
Well, if you start from the first floor is really an area where consumers get to know about whiskey making. The second floor is really a more in-depth understanding about the different flavors in whiskey, as well as the art of what we call blending whiskey. The third floor is really a place where consumers get to enjoy, the different flavors and drink different types of Johnnie Walker whiskeys.
And why did Diageo open the first Johnnie Walker House outside Scotland in China?
When we built the house, what we really wanted to do was to build a Scotch whiskey culture in China. That was our primary purpose. We wanted to be an embassy of whiskey.
What is one of the largest challenges that you have educating Chinese consumers about Scotch?
The house gives them the opportunity to experience those flavors. If you look around this room, there are about 400 different malts from all parts of Scotland, and they all contain different flavors. And it is through these experiences, I don't think there's a place in China that allows them to experience so many flavors in one single location. And that's been not only a challenge for us, I don't think it's a challenge. I think it's more about creating and evolving the experience for the Chinese consumer. One of the things we're very, very proud of, in fact, is we've seen what we call three generations of consumers. So we brought in the first generation of consumers, we brought the second generation of consumers, and the second generation of consumers brought the third generation of consumers. And that's something that we're really proud of because it brings people constantly back to the house to experience whiskey.
So speaking of entrance to the Johnnie Walker House is obviously very exclusive. How do you decide who gets in?
The house is by invitation only. We look at two different groups of consumers in China. The first group of consumer are consumers who have a very keen interest and are lovers of Scotch. And this house gives them a chance to discover even more than what they know. The second group of consumers are consumers that embody what we call the Johnnie Walker spirit, which is keep walking. So they're stylish, very progressive, sophisticated entrepreneurs, celebrities, and people who, have in them the ability to inspire more people and talk about whiskey credibly. And not only that, we look at what we call creating the new Chinese gentleman. And this is not actually just from us. I think it's also from consumers. What consumers are telling us is that if you want to be a new Chinese gentleman, you can't just know wines, cognacs, Diageo. Knowing whiskey needs to be the next thing to be what we call a new Chinese gentleman.
Talk a little bit about how Johnnie Walker brands within its own products.
The house is really about not just the different labels or the different what we call variants, right? It's really more about experiencing in different flavors in whiskey. We focus more around a premium Scotch experience because that's what Chinese consumers are looking for. And if you look at what's been really popular in the house is really our limited editions, as well as recreations of what we called artisan blends that's been created over the last in the early days, in the late 1800s and early 1900s. A good example is the 1910 edition, which we create primarily for the house. It is a blend of whiskey. It's a blended whiskey which embodies the flavors in which consumers like and drink in the early 1900s, and taken straight from the blending recipes of Alexander Walker.
And this is something that you're launching exclusively in China for the Chinese consumers?
That's right. It can only be bought and is only sold through the Johnnie Walker House.
Thanks, Lawrence. Now we'll head back to the studio where PT Black will share a few tips that every luxury retailer should hear.
Luxury retail in China is an arms race of design fabulousness. Brands are proudly bringing their best retail concepts here, but operating the stores isn't so simple. So here are 3 pieces of shop-level, street-level advice. First, watch the attitude. Check that luxury brand sneer at the border. Lots of shoppers, especially outside of Tier 1 cities, are new to luxury brands and easily scared away. Off-putting attitude is a very common complaint, especially among aspirational young women who are shopping with their paramours and are hypersensitive to perceived slights. Now, this is not to say the customer is always right. There are some demands no store should accommodate, like smoking, yelling, even hitting. No VIP merits that treatment. Wise brands realize quickly that keeping a difficult customer leads to losing valuable staff. And that's the second point. Hire top retail staff. They are worth their weight in gold. For luxury brands, retail is priority number 1. There is a shortage of talent in the market. Global brands are reaching far afield. Some are even combing top MBA programs in the US and Europe to find anyone speaking Chinese who's willing to come back and run a shop. That's smart. Now, my final word is education. Brands talk a lot about their need to educate the customer. But education goes both ways. It's all well and good to talk about how great a wine's vintage is, but will it go with Cantonese or Shanghainese food better? Which pen makes the right gift for what level of business partner? What's the right purse to buy for a wife? What's the right purse to buy for a not wife? That's the real education going on. Global luxury is finally going local here in China. So how do you say sneer in Mandarin?
Thanks, PT. With me now is Tim Schlick, DDB's Head of Strategic Planning in Greater China, Elan Shou, China Managing Director and Senior Vice President at Reuter Finn, and Charles de Brabant, Asia Director at St. Pierre, Brabant, Lee & Associates. We're talking about experiential marketing in China, particularly for luxury brands. We asked 8 of our regulars whether Chinese luxury consumers care more about price or quality. 6 say price, 2 told us quality matters more. Tim, you say quality. Why?
Because it depends on what type of luxury or what category in luxury you're talking about. When you're talking about high-end products, then it doesn't really matter whether it's 10% more or less. What it does matter is what kind of quality, what kind of face do I get for the brand, and how quickly can I get it. So it's totally disconnected from price.
But, I mean, when you talk about the disconnect, are you seeing this for your clients in a specific sector? You know, that you feel that is very strongly associated with this disconnect?
No, not only our clients. It is about every client in the upper premium luxury segment, where it's really, really about a lot of money. There we see that consumers really care about, okay, is it a genuine product? So that's why they prefer to travel to Europe to be absolutely sure this is the real deal. And once they are in the store, they go for the highest price. Which, in that sense, is a determinator of quality. Do I get the best that is available?
And Elan, what's your reaction to the Johnnie Walker House? Why would an investment like this pay off for Diageo?
It's a great experience, and I think experience does matter a lot for the luxury consumers because they need to feel the brand. It's very important for them to really understand the culture of brand and believe in what the brand is selling to them. I'll give you an example of I think Cartier did something really great, which is Art de Cartier, the Art of Cartier, which is the exhibition of the classic jewelries of Cartier. I think the first one is 2004 in Shanghai Museum, and the second one is in Beijing Palace Museum, a national museum. There's millions of people just went there to see the classic jewelries, and they really believe in what Cartier is selling that king of jewelry and jewelry for king, things like that. I think definitely that convey the brand image directly to the target consumers.
I think in terms of fashion brands, a lot of the houses that have already started to innovate, Dunhill and the others that we've mentioned, you know, they've already gone through a bit of history, recent history in China. But when you look at brands like Diageo and the Johnnie Walker House, this is something new where they're in a playing field and they're building this house and still deciding perhaps what to do with it. What would you recommend to them if you were in control of the house?
That's a tough one because I think many people have thought about it yet, and that's why, well, we can't really see where this is going. But I think what it does for the brand, and this is what I think Diageo should be doing, is see it as a center of exclusivity and limit it to the very upscale part of their brands and create an aspirational halo around it or around it. This is the ultimate level of appreciation you can get from a brand like Johnnie Walker to get into that house.
I think it's all about the brand spirit they want to convey. Because when you say Johnnie Walker, let's keep walking, that's the brand spirit. So whatever reflects this brand spirit should be brought into this house. And I think it can be very open-minded. It can be some innovations and experience that quite new and eyes-opening. Exhibitions can be one thing, arts can be another. Sometimes competitions, things, unique things that make people believe it. It's very difficult to do, but keep working that you did it here. I think something convey the brand image will be critical.
To go off the keep walking thing, I think that Johnnie Walker, I haven't been to the house, so it's a little bit difficult to talk about it. I've heard about it because my wife did some art things in it. But I think they've been extremely astute as a brand in order to tailor the keep walking byline to the Chinese consumers. Because if you look at the inherent history or the DNA of the brand, it's very much a solitary pursuit. As we think of whiskey, it's sort of an older person's pursuit, and we all know that in China and in other countries in Asia, whiskey or cognac is drunk collectively as sort of a celebratory moment. So I think they've done some very interesting advertising in order to celebrate that and yet and celebrate the group and yet promote the Keep Walking campaign. So if I were going to go to the house, to your point, I think one, you want it to make it exclusive. But I think one of the things that brands have to think about, and I think that's one thing that Lancôme did extremely intelligently with the Rose community on internet, is what do I want to give these people over and above selling them my product? And that really, you have to lock into the lifestyle of those people. What is important to them? When Lancôme launched a Rose community, they basically started to think, well, at that point, we're a brand that promotes French or European form of elegance. This is a time where women are starting to make themselves up. So let's help Chinese women become more elegant. Let's try and answer a certain number of their concerns that go beyond just skincare product, beyond just makeup products, beyond just perfumes, in order to help them become more beautiful, eventually more seductive, in a European manner, which is what is, in sort of a French elegance way, which is what is proper to Lancôme. And they've been extremely successful at doing that. So if I were Johnnie Walker, the point is to say, well, what do I want to do with this community within this space? What do I want to give these people that go beyond just selling whiskey? And eventually, and looking at the entire lifestyle and say, what can I promote with these people in order for it to be successful?
Some of the brands fail to do in the experiential marketing space is that they only look at their brand and the consumer, and they don't look at what environment they operate in, and that's why many brands do not stand out at all. But some brands, international brands, go an interesting way. For example, many brands start to think about marketing to Chinese consumer outside of China. Harrods, for example, trains a lot of staff for Chinese consumers and doesn't even enter China. I think that's fascinating where they go like, okay, we just need to talk to consumer, but we need to be aware that's a tough market, so we need to find our space in which we operate in and still can do something.
I was just there 2 weeks ago and they have Union Pay signs everywhere. And so they're really very aware, as you say, of the Chinese consumer. Yeah. And, because they actually represent their own brand, but also all the brands that are carried within there, they're really doing a service for everyone.
Well, but I think that that's where they've got an advantage. And exactly to your point, when you're just focusing on a retail brand, even a car brand, for instance, it's only your brand universe, often dictated by products. Whereas if you're Harrods, you're actually offering a service. of which is sort of a house of brands, and you enter a certain world. So they are much better prepared, in my view, to orchestrate the experience than brands that are just selling, or not just, because there's a lot of them are fantastic brands, but where the primary thing they're selling is a product. Because this is the thing to the Johnnie Walker House, is that they're coming from a product culture to suddenly having to deliver a full experience, which is a very different marketing. You need a whole bunch of different marketing skills in order to achieve that.
And an ongoing experience, one where people don't just go back once. They want to keep anticipating the events and build a relationship. Because oftentimes you see huge events, they come and then they're gone. And then the brand kind of awareness blips and it spikes for a week or two, and then it's
very important to differentiate product and brand. That's totally two concepts, but a lot of times we see people just selling the product. Well, when you do the brand, you are building inspirational things, and it's more than the product sales itself. When you have a very good foundation of the brand, you can sell different products because they inherited the same brand image. And but if you only focus on the product, it will be very hard for you to have real good experience.
Well, and I think even though it's a slightly new territory for a lot of the brands, we're already starting to see some innovation, such as in the Johnnie Walker House, where they're removing the labels off of their various products and allowing customers to truly taste what actually appeals to them rather than what they're trained to do by looking at the label. And I think, you know, we're at the beginning of an interesting journey for a lot of the luxury brands. Charles, Ilan, Tim, thanks for joining us on Thoughtful China. That wraps it up for today. Be sure to subscribe to us on Tudo and YouTube, and you can also follow us on Weibo and Twitter. Thanks, and we'll see you again.